Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So today's video is going to be a recent reads wrap up for the first 10 books that I've read in July. We can go ahead and get started, and like always we'll move from the lowest rated to the highest rated. So I have a whole bunch of 3 stars to talk to you about today. The first book I'll talk about is The Chosen by Taran Matharu. I did this as a buddy read with Mahalia from Nerd It This Way, and this turned out to be really bizarre. Like, I think it's supposed to be a portal fantasy type book, but it was strange. So basically the premise is that people have vanished throughout history with no real explanation. So we follow our main character, Cade, who is at boarding school, and he is suddenly transported to this realm, I guess, that has like dinosaurs, ancient relics, a variety of people, including some of his classmates, and everybody, and everyone essentially must be like these contenders in some sort of game. So it's a fun idea, but it was kind of weird. And like, I don't know, saying this, I'm like, how can you go wrong with having dinosaurs and all these things? But I think like ultimately the problem is that it was just trying to do too much. In general, of course, I love the dinosaurs, and I liked the variety of historical things going on here. There's kind of like a mention of the Bermuda Triangle, so I was like, okay, you know, like I can kind of see how all of this works together, I guess. But there was also like a very strange use of dual timelines at the beginning of the book, where like I think it would have been much better for us to just follow a linear story, but we like kind of go back and forth at the beginning where Cade is like transported to this new realm, and then we like flash back to like him going to boarding school and stuff, and I was just kind of like, I don't know. I don't think that this was a good use of dual timelines. I also didn't particularly care for any of the characters. I thought that they were all kind of forgettable, and like other than, I guess, the main character having written down his name, like, I can't tell you a single name for any of the characters. However, all this being said, you know, it was very fast-paced. There's some interesting things that happen at the end with, like, certain developments, but I don't think I really feel the need to continue. I also feel like this is a YA book, but I think it's on the younger side for YA. Like, it felt, I mean, it's not like the writing is, like, juvenile or anything like that, but, like, it just felt like it was intended for a slightly younger audience. So, you know, I mean, this was fine, but not my favorite, basically. The next 3-star book I'll talk about is The Silence of Bones by Junher. So this is a YA historical mystery type book. This is set in Korea in like the 1800s, I believe. So our main character is indentured to the police bureau, and she has to help with the investigation of a noblewoman's murder. However, along the way, the inspector that she's assigned to kind of becomes the main murder suspect. Our main character is like trying to figure out what happened and trying to like clear this inspector's name, basically. So I felt like I expected something else based on the synopsis, and I don't know. I think the way it's phrased, like, isn't quite what actually happens, I think. Like, I felt like I expected our main character and this inspector to have like a closer relationship, but that wasn't really the case. I don't think I really actually cared about the murder all that much, which was surprising, or really any of the characters, so that was a little bit disappointing for me. However, I did really like this historical setting and kind of like learning more about this period in Korean history. There's certainly more conflicts with Catholics than I expected, so like I really had no idea that this was actually something that happened in Korean history, so that was pretty interesting to learn about, but I don't know, again, just like not really what I anticipated. There's like a kind of interesting subplot about finding family, and there were some unexpected bits that like relates to this. In terms of the actual murder mystery, it wasn't completely predictable, so that was nice, but like overall, I just really struggled to get into this and didn't love it as much as I thought I might. The next 3-star book I'll talk about is Pacifica by Kristen Simmons. So this is actually inspired by the internment camps for Japanese Americans, and the author's great-grandmother was actually relocated as part of this. So that was really, like, a really interesting inspiration that I didn't know until, you know, there's like an author's note at the beginning. So that was cool, but like ultimately I don't feel like the story itself was as connected to this inspiration as I guess I would have expected having read this author's note. So basically the premise here is that there are 500 lucky lottery winners who get to leave this like really polluted land and go to this kind of like island paradise. One of our main characters, Marin, is a Corsario, so she kind of knows that this island paradise doesn't actually exist. So like where are these people going? Generally speaking, I think this was less about the mystery of where they were going than I anticipated. There is part of like figuring out where they're actually going and it like not turning out to be this island paradise at all, but I guess it just like wasn't quite as focused on that as I had anticipated. It's also not as like piratey, I guess, as I expected. You know, it mentions Marin being this like Corsario royalty. She's like a pirate like her father and his father before them, you know, etc. But like, I don't know, that didn't really come into play as much as I anticipated, I suppose. This was like a really like cool and also kind of terrifying post-apocalyptic setting where basically everything is kind of like run down and you know, this places have become uninhabitable. There's you know, like the sea levels are rising. There's a whole bunch of trash in the ocean, which made for some like really gross scenes. Did not love that. There was a bit of plot points that deal with like protests and brutality. So I was like, this is actually kind of relevant to things that are going on right now. So that was a little bit unexpected. There's also kind of plots about looking down on others, you know, how there's this like vast separation between the people who are really high up in society and just like everyday people. The characters were pretty decent. Our main characters, Marin and Ross, are, you know, like fairly fine, I guess. Ross is the president's son, and he like learns more about what's actually going on and insists that his dad, you know, do the right thing. And I don't know. So he's certainly like a more moral character. But yeah, overall, I mean, this was decent, but not my favorite. The next 3-star book I'll talk about is How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. So this is a nonfiction book. So this is essentially a combination of his memoir and this like historical nonfiction about racism and how to be actively anti-racist. And there's like, each chapter is broken up into different categories. So like, how can you be an anti-racist in regards to like gender and, you know, things like that. I don't know. I really appreciate the message here, and I do think that this is good for people to read. I just, I think it was, again, just like not quite what I expected. Like, I thought it would be more like, I mean, and I don't even know what I anticipated, like literally like bullet points on like how to be anti-racist. I don't know. At the beginning of each chapter, there's like these definitions of like racist versus anti-racist in these different categories, and I didn't find those particularly helpful because they're essentially the same word for word except for replacing racist with anti-racist. So I didn't find those particularly helpful, and I think this relates to just generally how I learn. I learned much better through example, so the parts in each of these chapters where he relates it to his own experience, I found those to be much more helpful than just like these kind of somewhat vague definitions, I suppose. But that's just kind of like a me thing, I think. I did think that his life story was really interesting, and I did enjoy those bits. I think it's interesting to learn about other people's experiences in their own words, so I thought that was kind of illuminating. The more historical parts, I think, were harder to get through for me, but again, this is just like a personal preference. I don't really love history, and like reading historical things, historical nonfiction is just like incredibly boring to me, so yeah, I mean, this is, again, just a personal preference. I struggled to get through those sections, but ultimately, like, I do think that I learned some things, and I think that this is, like, a good book to read if you're interested in, like, actually learning how to become actively anti-racist. Alright, so I think the last of the 3-star books that I will talk about today is Only Human by J.D. Estrada. So this is an urban fantasy book that is really unlike any other urban fantasy book I've ever read. So we follow Nathaniel, who is a reporter, and he has kind of lost faith in humanity. He kind of essentially gets caught up in this quest to save the world. Along the way, he learns the truth about vampires, these Therians who are shapeshifters, angels, demons, there's plant people, and just like generally humanity. So this is pretty good, and I'm not exactly sure why I didn't love it more. I think this was maybe just a case of like reading it at the wrong time. Like, you know, obviously I've already talked about several 3-star books that I've read, so, you know, just like reading kind of middle of the road books and then just coming off the slump of June, I think I just like, I don't know, wasn't maybe quite in the mood for this more philosophical nature of this book, but so I think it's just like maybe a matter of timing for me. But anyway, so this is very action-packed, and there's a whole bunch going on here. I really liked all of these creatures. There's, you know, like aspects hanging from various mythologies. There's things from like Norse mythology, Christianity. There's actually like these dampier creatures, which are like kind of half human, half vampire, and I don't see that quite as frequently in urban fantasy books. Like there's a handful that I've read that feature that, but it's definitely not as common. So I think this was like a fun touch on it, and I thought it was really fun to learn more about like vampire biology. We have some tarot reading aspects. There's like angels and demons, so I thought that was cool. There's certainly some like kind of ominous moments, I think, with the angels and demons. I also liked these plant people. That's, again, not something that I usually see. Nathaniel himself is like definitely one of this like chosen one type trope. There's some really cool references here. There's like references to Calico Jack, Peter Pan, Red Riding Hood, so that was fun. There's like a whole bunch of little tidbits thrown throughout. So the author was actually saying, and like we had kind of exchanged some messages, but I was talking about just like the different inspirations of like books and other things like that. So I think I'm trying to remember what all they were. I think there was like Dune, Lord of the Rings, I don't know, a few other things, and just like how references are strewn throughout. So like I think that's kind of fun, just like a little treasure hunt, I guess, of inspiration throughout the books. I actually really liked the commentary about like God and Christianity here, and like I've kind of mentioned this, like I'm not super religious myself, but I think that this particular take on it was really interesting. So anyway, yeah. So again, like all of these components are things that like by themselves I really like, but like I don't know, ultimately speaking, I'm not sure why I wasn't able to get into it more, and I think again it was maybe just like a wrong time to pick it up type thing. So anyway, if you're looking for an urban fantasy that has more of like this philosophical nature to it, I would definitely check this out. So now we move to the 3.5 star rating, and the first book I'll talk about here is Wayward by Blake Crouch, and I did this as a buddy read with Leslie from the Nerdy Narrative. So this is the sequel to Pines, and it's the second book in this Wayward Pines trilogy, I think. Wayward Pines is this like idyllic town in Idaho where things are just like not quite right and not what they seem. So this obviously like picks up after the events of book 1, so I'm going to be kind of vague because like 1, it's a sequel, 2, it's like a thriller where it's really best to not know a whole lot about it going into it. We get to learn more about the town and, you know, what's going on. We learn about the characters more and investigate things and kind of like learn more about character dynamics, I suppose. So we'll leave it at that. This was still quite good. I just don't think it had quite the same eerie tone as book 1. I did like learning more about the characters and just like relationships between them all, to learn more about how the town developed, so I thought that was quite fun, I guess. There's certainly some more tense moments here, like for instance there's the scene where they're kind of like climbing up a mountain, and that was a little terrifying. I'm kind of afraid of heights, so that was like you know, like I was a little nervous about that. It just wasn't quite as alarming, I suppose, as book 1, not quite as tense, and I mean I was still like reading through it really quickly, but it just wasn't quite the same tone, I think. But it still leaves off in a place where I need to know more, so I'm excited to pick up the 3rd book eventually and, you know, finish out this trilogy. So yeah, overall, like, I don't think it was quite as good for me as book 1, but I still had a good time with it. So I think the other 3.5 star book I'll talk about today is Cry Pilot by Joel Dane. So this is more of like a military sci-fi type book. We follow our main character K2 as he like wants to join the military, but with his background, he like essentially, in order to do that, must first volunteer for a suicide mission as this cry pilot, and he essentially cheats in order to survive. So he ends up being assigned to a squad of misfits for basic training. They end up being deployed against this new bioweapon that's demolished every military force that has gone against it. So this was pretty good overall, I thought. The bioweapons were really interesting. So it's kind of like this resurrected technology and like ancient species, and so like you get all sorts of weird combinations of, I don't know if it's like creatures is the right term, all sorts of strange things. The like tech that they use as these cry pilots was a really intriguing concept. It's kind of like organic technology, I want to say, and I don't know, I thought that was just really cool. I really liked the squad that our main character joins. It essentially kind of becomes this like found family that wants to protect each other, even though like some of them are definitely like weaker links, I guess, in terms of, you know, like military abilities, but they all try to like save each other and work together. our main character definitely has some secrets, and I don't know, I'm not sure I fully connected with him, but I do like how he's trying to atone for things in his past. This is very heavy on like acronyms and military things, so if you're not into military sci-fi, you may not like this as much. But for me, like generally, for some reason, military sci-fi seems to work pretty well for me, so I did enjoy this. There's certainly a large portion of this that deals with training, but I tend to like those if there's, you know, some sort of like conflict that I have to face as well, and that's definitely what happened here. Things get a little crazy at the end for sure. The pacing, it was definitely slow in parts, I will say that, but I did as a whole enjoy this, and I won this in a giveaway as well as an arc of the second book, so I'll read that probably sometime soon. But yeah, I'm interested to see where this series goes. So now we move to the 4-star book range, and I think the only book I will talk about here is Pitch Dark by Courtney Alameda. This is a YA sci-fi horror, and I love the combination of sci-fi and horror. We have this huge spaceship that has been lost for centuries, and one of our main characters, Tuck, along with the rest of his crew, have been in stasis for like hundreds of years. So this actually contains a part of Earth that is desperately needed to save humanity. So we have our other main character, Laura, who is a shipwrighter, and she, along with her family, are searching for these like lost artifacts and ships. There ends up being an actual collision between ships, and they essentially have to team up to fight human monsters and actual like creepy monsters to save everything. So this looks really great. I haven't read anything by this author before, but I was like so impressed by this that I picked up another book by her, and you know, I'm very excited to read it. So I liked these monsters quite a bit. They're sound-based, and generally it's super creepy to think about. I'm not entirely sure what happened to like cause these to come into being, but I'm intrigued by it, and like I don't want to say more to avoid spoilers because it's like, I don't know, super creepy to learn about. There's some definitely scary moments that happen in the depths of the ship. I really liked Laura. She's strong and like is one of these characters who doesn't need anyone to rescue her. She's going to be doing the rescuing herself. I don't want to spoil things, but there's some things that have happened to her and she's trying to fight back against them. She's also a hacker, so that was really fun. Our other main character, Tuck, was, I think, maybe not quite as strong for me as Laura, but I did like him. It's definitely gotta be tough to, you know, go from, I think, 2016 to, you know, hundreds of years later where, like, everything has changed, and, you know, like, I liked all of his references, but I thought he's definitely, like, out of place, and it was kind of funny to have him, like, make these references and Laura being like, I have literally no idea what you're talking about. The plot is really quite cool. There's kind of this, like, crazy setup with the Earth is dying, and there are these terrorists who are trying to kill humanity because, like, they think that, you know, humanity has caused all these problems that, like, people don't deserve to live, essentially. So, yeah, we get some, like, mechas and some fun space tech, and obviously, like, these giant spaceships, so that was cool. Some of the plot points, I was like, I have no idea how this is even possible, but, like, I'll suspend my disbelief and just, like, roll with it because it's just a fun concept. What I thought was really interesting here, we end up, you know, like, hundreds of years later, we kind of have this, like, these more modern people, I guess, are definitely, like, biracial and just kind of a blend of cultures. So we have a lot of our characters speaking Spanish or just, like, blends of Spanish and English. This is actually Own Voices. Our author is of European and Mexican heritage. So we do get some commentary here about, like, racism and oppression and kind of just, like, doing what's right and trying to improve things for everyone. So I actually really liked this message, and I thought this was just such a good book. So I definitely highly recommend this. Now we move into our final category, which is the 4.5-star reads, and the first one I will talk about here is Beach Read by Emily Henry. So this is a romance where we have Augustus, who is this, like, literary fiction writer, and we also have January, who is a romance author. So they're definitely opposites, but they end up living next to each other in these beach houses. Both of them have writer's block, so they essentially make this deal to try writing each other's genres. So she'll teach him, you know, these, like, various romantic comedy moments, and he'll take her to interview former death cult members. This actually was a really great romance for me. It's definitely not as light as this cover implies. This definitely touches on heavier themes, like there's cancer, parental death, affairs. both protagonists are really struggling with things going on in their lives, but like ultimately I think like I really liked this kind of exploration of these heavier topics, and I felt like our main characters were kind of like opposite sides of the same coin and worked really well together, so I liked that. I thought this writer's block discussion and just like, you know, the techniques that they're using to try to get out of it, I thought that was really interesting because like, I don't know, you know, like I'm obviously not an author, but I do have to write my dissertation, and I find it really hard sometimes to actually just get started on writing, and like there's definitely moments where I'm just like staring at a blank section and being like, I don't know what to say. I don't even know how to get started. So, you know, like even though I'm not an author, I felt like some of this like discussion about writer's block was relatable. Again, based on the cover, like you would think it's like this kind of summery, beachy type read. It's not as much. Like there's not as much beach as I thought essentially here, but it's still really good. I definitely believed in the romance and the connection that our main characters had. I thought January was quite fun and relatable. I really liked her relationship with her best friend. I do wish we could have seen more of that, but you know, such is life. Gus, this male main character, his side characters were fun as well, and like I did like him as a character. There's a really funny scene here where they're like actually at a book club, and January has wine in her purse, and she's just like drinking wine out of her purse. So I just thought that was highly entertaining. So yeah, there's, again, I feel like this was a nice blend of like some funnier moments and some heavier topics. So I definitely liked it. There was like a bit of this like kind of misunderstanding type trope where our main characters are like really quick to judge and kind of like, yeah, I mean, misunderstand situations and kind of get into conflicts that way. Which, like, I think misunderstandings is like not my favorite trope, but ultimately speaking, I did have a really great time with this, and if you're interested in a romance that deals with some of these, again, more heavy topics, I would definitely recommend this. The last book I'll talk about today is also another 4.5-star read, and that's The Sunken Mall by Katie Edwards. So this is like book 1.5 in the tarot sequence. It's just a novella between the last son and the hanged man. So he had just like, I think, recently released this for free. So I was like, I mean, yeah, I loved the last son. Like, I'm definitely going to be gathering up all of, I don't know, anything related to this series. So it's just such a great world and a really fantastic urban fantasy series. Like I'm definitely invested. This will be like an auto buy series, so I'm just super excited to continue with it. Rune and Brand are shopping for gifts for their ward that they've taken in to like make him feel like he's really a member of their household. So they go to the Sunken Mall, which like it was this mall that was lost in the 80s at Christmas time. Basically, in this world, this like New Atlantis buildings have been translocated to actually form New Atlantis. So I thought, and like sometimes this translocation doesn't work quite well, so that's what happened with the Sunken Mall. It just like straight up disappears, but lo and behold, one of our characters knows how to get there. So that was really cool. So obviously, I thought this was really fun. We do get more information about New Atlantis, which I thought was very helpful, and it's just like, again, really fascinating just learning about this, like, you know, location, how it was made. I thought that was super cool. We definitely get more fun action scenes with these like Atlantean aspects coming up, and again, like these sigils that are used to store magic and release it in certain ways. We do get a variety of cool new characters introduced here, and I do kind of hope they come up in the next books, and we shall see. I just really liked this idea that they're like searching for a gift, and I thought that was like really sweet. And I think like one of the strengths of, I mean, you know, again, I've only read the first book and this novella now, but I think one of the strengths here is just like all these character relationships, and I don't know, it just works so well, and I just loved it. I loved it all. There's actually like a really funny Spencer's reference. I don't know if this is just in the US or what, but like, and I actually don't know if Spencer's is even still in business. I haven't been to a mall in a while, but it's just kind of like this weird eclectic store full of just like all sorts of random stuff. But there's like a really funny reference to this. There's one character really likes lava lamps and other knickknacks, so I just thought this was just like a really hilarious reference. You get more fun banter here. There's these great character dynamics. There was actually this really cool scene with this like rotating restaurant. I don't know, well, I'm doing a whole lot of arm gestures here today, but you know, again, I think this just like really goes to show I am definitely invested in this series, and I can't wait to get to the Hanged Man. Those are the first 10 books that I've read in July, and everything that I have to talk to you about today. And again, you know, like, I've read a ton of books, so I think my next video will probably also be a recent reads wrap-up. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or think you might pick them up. And for your question of the day, let's just go with, like, do you like military sci-fi? I hope you're having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.